Ladies and gentlemen, Hebrews and Shebrews, welcome to the Life Podcast, where we inspire you, Torah-observant believers, to thrive as peculiar people in the modern world. And we're doing that this week by interviewing Jason Towe. You may know him from the Way documentary. He was the protagonist of the film. He is a third-generation Baptist minister. His grandpa was a Baptist minister. His dad was a Baptist minister. He was starting to preach as a Baptist minister, and his life was interrupted when he realized the Torah was relevant. So we tell that story in The Way, and this interview picks up with Jason after The Way, and he's going to catch us up to today. What's happened to him? He's going to talk to us about the miracle of being gifted a huge building so that he could host an assembly in North Georgia. He's going to talk to us about going to seminary school after he understood that the Torah was relevant and what that has been like. He's going to talk to us about fostering children. He's fostered 30 plus children and adopted many of those. He's going to talk to us about how important that is and how you, whether you can foster or not, can help support that in your state. Thank you for watching the Life Podcast. Thank you for listening. If you're listening on podcast platforms, please like this video, share it, subscribe to the platform you're listening to, and give us a rating, like 5 stars if you can, on one of these podcast platforms, if you love what we're doing. It helps us get the word out there. We can't continue to do this without you helping us. We need you.
This episode of the Life Podcast is brought to you by Shepherd's Crook Coffee, a Torah-observant, family-run small business that responsibly sources their beans from farms who farm with ethical practices as far as their workers go and clean practices as far as the chemicals and things. So you're getting beans that are not only roasted to order and absolutely delicious, but free of chemical pesticides and all those kinds of things that you don't want to be consuming. Even though you won't see an organic label on the bag, Greg and Laura, the owners, have taken great pains to make sure that they only source organic, cleanly grown coffee beans for your morning cup of coffee. Shepherd's Crook also offers a subscription service, so you never have to run out of coffee. I don't know if you've ever woken up and you're all groggy and you're all excited to make your coffee and then you realize you don't have any. They will ship you freshly roasted coffee once every 2 weeks or once a month, whatever your preference is. And once you've found your favorite roast, you can get a great big bag and have this big bulk bag of coffee. So when all your friends come over for Shabbat and you're staying up till 1 a.m. talking about the Bible, you'll have this beautiful organic coffee to give them. So go to shepherdscrookcoffee.com for 25% off of your first order. Use the code THELIFE.
Without further ado, I give you Jason. Jason, thank you so much for being on the Life Podcast, man.
Oh, thanks for having me again.
Here we are in Georgia, baby.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be here. I'm sorry that Amanda and Katie aren't here, but it's hard to pry them away from the children.
Yeah.
For anyone who has not seen the Way documentary, you are kind of the protagonist in the movie, and we follow your story. And I think, and we bookend the movie with you. We intro with you, we exit with you, and maybe we'll play a clip or something just so people see that, or at least see the end monologue or whatever.
From no outside influence, God challenged our belief system. God rebuilt our faith from the foundation up. We started over. And God put our feet on the solid rock foundation of the truth. And if the Father had not have done that, the cold shoulders, the lack of responsive love from these self-identified God-called men would have drove me away from the faith completely, and I would have turned my back on God and walked away to never look back again. But thankfully, God, in His mercy, showed us the way. We don't claim to have all the answers. We're just God's children who are trying their best to follow what we see in the Word of God.
Now that you've been in this Torah movement for 8 years, I'm wondering, what your thoughts are on it. But we could get to that after we get to your life. Like, catch us up. What has happened between when we interviewed you on the way and now?
Okay. I mean, it's been a pretty wild journey because, I talk about it, in various interviews, but, prior to the way, we came into this walk and had kind of stepped away from what we had always known in mainstream and got a lot of kickback from that. Lost, most of our friends, all of our friends and most of our family kind of really took a step back and arm's length away from us for a while. And, I often joke around talking about that, before the way came out, it's like I couldn't buy a Facebook friend, and then after that, so many people, we had no idea that our testimony and our journey would resonate with so many people. And we started getting response from people, and the way documentary and the exposure of that, and getting our story out there about what we had went through, and our journey coming out of what is typically referred to as mainstream into where we are now, and picking up some of the things that I feel like that Christianity's lost along the way, and trying to coming back to our roots, biblical roots. It allowed us to meet people and have connections. We started going and traveling, and we got invitations to various places across the United States. We had opportunities to go and speak. We had various interviews and podcasts and things like that. And then ultimately led to us going to speak at a congregation we'd never heard of before, that was 16 hours away. And there was someone in that congregation that was moved so much by our testimony that we received some aid to really plant our feet here at home and in our hometown to establish an assembly and a place. We had bounced around in the beginning. It was a Bible study that started out in in a side room of a yogurt shop that was actually decorated for like parties and festivals and stuff. And it's crazy because the interior walls of that room was decorated almost like it was an interior of a cavern, and even the windows were decorated in such a way that the name of it, was called the Cave. And so people ask, so where did you guys meet? When you came out of the mainstream church, where did you guys meet? And I said, we met in a cave. And so we met in a cave, but not really. It was just a decorated room, but it was kind of cool. So we went from there, and we kind of outgrew that place, that business. Actually, it was a pretty honorable thing because the owners of the company of that yogurt shop had just began to understand some of these things as well. They ran a business that was normally open on Saturdays. They decided to start closing their business, and on Saturdays ultimately led to the fall of the business. I mean, they made a decision to shut the business down and to go into a different venture because they did not want to be open on the Sabbath day.
Whoa.
And so when that happened, they sold the business. The business shut down, and we had to find somewhere else to meet. And it was crazy because we actually, during that transition process of trying to find somewhere, I actually ran across a lady that my wife and I were having dinner one evening, and we ran across a lady we hadn't saw in several years that I had dealt with some real estate transactions with in the past, back when I used to do real estate. And made a comment because they had, at one point, her and her husband had a restaurant, and we loved to eat there. And it had been shut down, and I said, hey, we really miss your restaurant. I was hoping if one day you're ever going to open it back up. One thing led to another. They weren't going to open it back up. Her and her husband had separated, and we began to talk, and come to find out, I asked her just nonchalant, it just kind of rolled off my tongue, hey, would you ever be interested in renting that building out to let us use it? And she said, for what? And I told her, I said, for the church gathering. And she's like, well, I don't know. And I said, She said, let's meet and look and see if the facility would work for you, because they were having to sell the facility. It was part of the issue where her and her husband were splitting up, and it was part of the divorce settlement. So she said, it's just sitting there empty. Meet me and we'll talk about it. So we met. I just laid it all on the table. I said, here's the difference between us and most other churches you're familiar with. We do this on a different day. You know, we're asking, the only thing we ask of you is, like, even though you've got the building for sale, please don't show it during that time, because we're going to be using that. She said, no problem. And was such a blessing when it all rolled out. She said, I don't want anything except you pay for the utilities. You can use the building. I was like, wow. So we were there for some time and getting settled in. And actually, she made me a really good offer on the building to buy it. But by that time, from the time that we had moved in to that building until time she wanted to sell it, we had outgrown it. Crazy enough, this was about the time that you and I had met, and for the first time we ended up on that phone with that phone call, and so I turned it down because the building wasn't really big enough. It wasn't going to suffice what we needed, and I said, we need a place to go.
Wait, will you talk about that phone call? Like, people don't know what happened there. If you want to, like, just talk about how we connected.
How we first met. So it was a strange event that we had met a couple who had invited us to dinner. They had attended one of our, I guess, Sabbath Bible studies in this yogurt shop. And a conversation come up about this movie that had been, it was almost like it was either had been or it was in the process of being made, about people who had experienced something similar to what we had coming out of mainstream. They discovered there's some things that they didn't understand before. We're trying to get back to the grassroots of following, the Messiah of the Bible. And somehow a name got thrown out. Your name. Somebody knew this guy named Luke Abafi, or I think they called you Luke Abafi or something like that.
I've gotten a lot.
And so I kind of like made a mental note of that. And it's weird that it stuck in my mind, because I'm not a names guy. People that know me, I struggle with remembering names, and it all has to do with a traumatic event where I had a major accident years ago, and it rattled something in my little bitty brain, and I don't remember names well. It takes me a minute. But anyway, I made a mental note of your name. And so I go home and I begin to research your name, trying to figure out how to find you, because I was interested in this film, because I wanted something to show to my friends and my family, to show them, hey, look, I'm not the only one that has lost their mind here. There are other people who see this too, because everybody thought we were going off the deep end. I found out we were on like prayer request lists for every church around here, because they thought I was leading my family into some kind of cult. And so, I literally had people come up to me in stores and be like, hey, man, how you doing? I'm doing good, man. How you doing? And like, well, good. So I was just checking to see how your family's doing. Said, I noticed your name and your family is on our prayer request list at our church. And I said, really? They're like, yeah. And they're like, I didn't know something. I was like, well, thanks. It's working. Keep doing it.
It was like secret prayer request list.
Yeah, and I found out it was like all these different places.
Put me on that.
So I somehow in research, I found your name. I found a phone number. And I thought, I don't know if this is even the right guy. I saw that you were a journalist. I looked up that. I'd done my homework enough to find out you were a journalist. So I thought, maybe this is the guy. I didn't know who you were doing this for, why you were doing it. I didn't know if you were working for some major film industry that was doing a documentary that, So I said, just take a chance. So I called the number. You didn't answer. I left a message. I said, hey, give me a call. It was like 2 weeks later, and the job that I was on was weird, because I never would have had a chance to normally speak, because I was actually a parts department manager at an automotive dealership at that time. And I had left the real estate industry and was back in the main working force, typical workforce. And just so happened that particular day, we had a guy that was out. We had a special order part we needed that was supposed to come in, supposed to have a car repaired. It didn't work. or the part didn't come in, so we located one at another dealership about 45 minutes away. Nobody was available. We needed to send, I called the dealership. They said they would sell it to me. I needed to get it that day. And I said, okay, here's the deal. I'll go get it on my lunch hour. And they said, okay, that's cool. I said, I'll just take my lunch hour. Now it'll take me an hour and a half to get there and back. So you'll have to give me grace for 30 minutes, but that way we can get the part. My counter guys can run it till I'm back. And they said, okay, great. That'll work. So I get in the company car and I pull out of the park, and literally as I was pulling out of the parking lot, you called me back. It was like 2 weeks later. And it was just the perfect day, the perfect time that I had 45 minutes to talk. And, I don't know how much you recall for that conversation, but, I was kind of, in the beginning, it was almost felt like I was kind of interrogating you a little bit, because I was asking you, who are you? Who do you work for? Why are you doing this? And because I had no idea that you actually believe this as well. We had never spoken before. We didn't know each other, and over our conversation, it's like I began to realize, wait a minute.
He's a member.
Yeah, I didn't.
He's
yeah,
not just
yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know if maybe, I didn't know who you're working in the beginning. I didn't know. Who knows? You could have worked for the History Channel, Discovery Channel. I don't know, and was going to paint this image of people like us to be in some negative light. And I really wanted to fill out what was this about. And finally, I think I remember asking you the question. So you're saying you believe this? And you're like, yeah. And then it's like I started interviewing you. I was like, oh, why do you believe this? And you begin to tell me, and it was like I told you, or you told me all about you before I told you about me, because you're telling me about how this all came to be and this thing with your mom and how this all turned out and all. And then it was weird because I was satisfied. I was like, I want to buy the film. Where'd I get it? You told me then it's not released yet. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, how do I buy it? And you told me about the website and this, that, and the other. And then it's like I remember I was satisfied. We were going to get off the phone, and you said, hey, wait a minute. So what's your story? And so I just began to just like spill it all out there, and kind of like this 30,000 foot flyby version of what had happened in our life and how we came from where we were to where we are. And it was strange because in a moment you said, I'm gonna give you this. I'm gonna throw this out there at you. I can't make you any promises, you said, but I want to ask you, would you tell your testimony and let me film it? I was like, wow, okay, sure. And so that's how we met, and that's how it all began. It was a journey on getting my wife, Amanda, to do it, because that was a story within itself. Because I come home and I'm like, hey, this is cool. I'll talk to this guy and we're going to do an interview. He wants to hear a testimony. And she's like, not me. And so, and it was crazy how that came about, because she was really skeptical too. She's like, I don't know this guy. I don't know what he's going to do, because he can either make this look really good, or he can make this look really bad, depending on, where he's coming from. And I said, I just don't get this feeling. And she said, I'll just have to pray about it. And ironically enough, about backing up in time about 8 months before you and I, 8 or 10 months before you and I had ever spoken, I had got an invite to go down to a church in South Georgia, deep South Georgia. The church asked me if I would come and speak. And we were coming full circle. We were full circle pretty much into this walk at this point. But this was a typical Sunday church. They were looking for a pastor. Somehow they had got their hands on a resume that I had circulated out years prior. And somehow they got their hands on it and they called me. I didn't know anybody there. And they invited me to come speak. And I can remember I still had some mainstream pastor friends at that time. And one of them, I remember him asking me a question. He said, are you going to go? And I said, well, sure. And he's like, well, are you just not going to tell them what you believe now? And I said, well, no. He said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to go down there and I'm going to tell them everything. The way I look at this is, I saw this as an opportunity. I'm going to do it once with everything I had. And I went down and I laid it all out. standing in a pulpit in a Sunday church. Last message I've ever spoken in a Sunday church, and I just laid it out on the table. Just told them what I believed and why I believed it. And I'll never forget, because I remember the name of the message. It was titled, Who is Your Jesus? And I was trying to paint the difference between the Messianic, version, the Messiah of the Bible versus the image that's painted so much today. And ironically enough, it was crazy because I got down to, it turned out that they had interviewed so many other pastors, and they actually called me back. And it was between me and another guy. And so, of course, that's how to get it, because I was, I told them that we observed Sabbath and I believed all that. But I said all that to say this, is that we met a lady down there that we'd never met her before. We kind of hit it off. I think we went and ate dinner with her family while we were there. And, fast forward back up to where we are about asking Amanda if she'd want to do the interview. She had not spoken to this woman. This woman knew nothing about our life. She knew nothing what had transpired. She knew nothing about me talking to you. She knew nothing about anything. This woman had not spoken to my wife at all. And it was crazy. My wife was praying about whether or not she should whether she thought she should participate in this film or the interview. And my wife gets up one morning and had a text message from this lady out of the blue. And she said, I don't know really why I'm supposed to do this, but I just really felt led to do this. You're on my mind. And she said, and her words, if I remember now, I don't want, misquote what was said, but if I remember the way it was said, if I remember it right, was the woman said something along the lines of, I don't know what you're doing or what you're about to go through or what you're about to do, but I feel like that the Spirit has given me a word to give to you that I don't even understand why. And the word is fortitude. And my wife, we began to look it up, of course, and that's, pressing forward in the midst of adversity. And my wife saw that as a sign. And so that's when she said, I'll do the interview.
No way.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's really how that happened. And she said, I'll do it, because she felt like that was an answer to her prayer.
This episode of the Life Podcast is brought to you by The Way documentary, The Truth, Reformation 2.0 Apologetics book, and Truth Tracks. The Way documentary tells the story of our movement. This is the story of people who were trading Easter ham for Passover lamb and Sunday church for Saturday Sabbath, all in an effort to live like their Savior. It dives into their stories through their own voices and into the history and theology that show how the church got to where it is today. The Truth, Reformation 2.0 is the only book of its kind, an all-encompassing theological treatise that answers every question a mainstream Christian might have about why you want to keep Torah. And finally, Truth Tracks are small comics, beautifully illustrated, that use stories and scripture to remind Christians that once we are saved by grace through faith, we are called to live and do the instructions of Yah, his Torah. If you want to learn more about any of these products, go to thewaydoc.com. That's theway, D-O-C, like documentary.com.
Man, I'm glad she did. I feel like people are glad that she did. Good.
So, yeah.
So then what happened? So then, okay, we did that. The Way came out, and then what happened then with your life?
We started traveling. We started going and speaking all over the place. Again, we go out.
Okay.
We go to this church. Sorry, I kind of backtracked a little bit, but we went to this church to tell our testimony. And one of the elders of that congregation wanted to have a conversation. Basically asked me a simple question. So what's your vision for ministry in North Georgia? And I just kind of laid it out. This is, I said, I grew up going to like church camps and boys camps and stuff like that, summer camps, stuff like that. And, I grew up, my grandfather was a full-time minister for 47 years. I went to every vacation Bible school. I went to every revival, every, youth camp you can imagine. And the youth camps really stuck out to me because I feel like I had some great memories as a child from those camps, with the exception, looking back now, is the one thing they were void of, and that was some solid biblical truth. And I thought, how cool would it be to have a facility to bring back, because nobody seems to do that around this area anymore. They don't have like youth camps and stuff like that during the summer camps where kids go and they get taught the Bible. I've done it every year for years when I was a child. So I said, that'd be cool to have that again, have a multi-purpose facility where we could have Sabbath services. We could do the biblical holidays here. We could be a community and a family, have a place that we could have the option to have retreats, maybe have some youth camps, some local outreach kind of stuff. And I just kind of laid all this out on the table. And the response I got back from this guy, and at that time I really didn't even know him. Now I call him a dear friend. He said, I'd never met him before, didn't have any idea who he was. And he said, man, he said, it sounds like you got a pretty good plan in mind. And my response was, I said, yeah, and I'll do it if Yahweh provides. That was the end of our conversation. It was late at night. He said, well, I better let you get in the bed because you guys got to catch a plane back tomorrow. And to make a long story real short, he reached out to me later and had felt led to support what we were doing here financially, and enabled us. And Yahweh used him as a vessel to help us to obtain the property that we have, because we had moved forward. Again, I talked about we were in that restaurant. It was too small. We were beginning to grow. This was about the time the Way documentary interview took place. And we began we started out with me and my wife and and our kids and this other man and woman in this yogurt shop. That's how we started. It was just a gathering together as a Bible study. Wasn't intended to try to develop a church. And it just happened. And people began to knock on the door. We had no advertisement, no name, no Facebook, no social media, no anything, no phone number, nothing. And people were just knocking on the door on Saturday going, I heard there was a Bible study going on Saturday morning. Can we join? And we began to grow. And so we turned down the offer to buy the building, and then she got a contract on it, so we had to move out. About that same time, a building about 3/10 of a mile came up for sale came up for rent that had once been used as a small little church. And I met with a guy, or made arrangements to meet the guy to ask him about renting it to check out the facility. So we're meeting there. He comes in and he says, sorry. He kept kind of looking outside, and he said, I'm sorry because I have somebody else coming to look at it. You were just closer. They're going to be here in about 20 minutes. So, I'm just keeping an eye on it when they pull in. And, so I'm telling him I'm literally sitting down on what we would call the staging area. It's a little small building. And, I was telling him, hey, I found out the guy's a deacon of his local church. I said, well, hey, let me just go ahead and throw this out there. We do church on Saturday. We do things different. This is different about us. I want to make sure you know that before you agree to rent this building to us, because I don't want to move in and then you start getting heat from your church members and, you ask me to leave. No, I have no problem with that. And about the time that happened, it's so crazy because the other people came in the back door. And it was an entire family, and I was sitting on this little elevated area that they would have called like the staging area, or what you would say where the pulpit would be in a traditional church, and in like what would be considered the sanctuary area. And this family comes in, and it's the husband, then the wife, and then their children, and they all kind of come into the room down the hallway, and they line up across in front of us. And they kind of introduced themselves, and the first thing I noticed is the sons and the dad were all wearing tassels. And I kind of looked and I said, whoa, what's the odds of that? And I introduced myself, and I just kind of looked down at his belt line, saw the tassel hanging out from under his shirt, and I said, I think we probably should have a conversation. And he kind of looked at me funny, and then he looked down at my belt line, he saw my tassel, and he said, yeah, we probably should. We literally step over into the corner. They're here to look at this building about renting it. Well, I don't know why. I'm there looking at it about renting it to move our fellowship there. And we began to have a conversation. They were out of somewhere out of South Carolina, I think it was. And they had come to this area and they were looking to start a Sabbath fellowship. They were trying to plant one. And lo and behold, one thing led to another. And between this time, the interviews and stuff, and I think the way had just come out. One of them says, you look familiar. We began to talk. And I said, well, maybe you've seen this documentary. They're like, yeah, that's it. Next thing you know, we're over in the corner all talking like we've known each other for 10 years. And the owner of this building is just kind of standing in the corner, just kind of looking at us like, what's going on? And the wife was in the back looking at the other areas of the room. And when she comes back in the room, her husband just says, hey, honey, we need to go. And she's like, oh, okay, what's going on? He said, we need to go because you're always at work here. Have a nice day. And left. And the guy rented the building to me.
Did you ever see them again?
Never saw them again.
You never saw them again?
No, never saw them again. It's unreal. I didn't know who they were then. Don't know who they are now. I mean, I'm sure that we probably exchanged names, but it was so brief. I didn't catch it, but he just simply looked at his wife, said, we need to go. You always at work here. He's looking to establish, he's got an established fellowship here. That's why we were going to do it. You're here. Have a nice day. You always at work here. Whoa. And he left. And so at that time, shortly after that is when the timeline lines up, when we moved in that building, when we got confirmation that this property was being purchased and donated. And we knew at that point, in the beginning, we're like, we got to figure out how to fix this place up where we can utilize it. This is just a temporary home. We're just going to leave it as it is. We're not going to do anything. We didn't hang a picture on the wall. We didn't do anything because we knew our time there was temporary because we were in the process of this whole venture here in the midst of this facility we're sitting in now. And, the property was bought, donated to us by people we really didn't know. And I remember calling the gentleman because he asked me to attend the closing. And because he said, I'm not coming to Georgia for that. He said, we'll do this as a mail away. Call me when it's over. I call him on the phone and I'm kind of in tears. My voice is trembling because I didn't know what had happened. We just had this massive piece of property that had been bought and donated to us by people that we didn't even know. And he answered, I'll never forget, he answered the phone. He said, well, I hope you got some good news. And I began to weep and say, I don't even know what to say. I don't know what to say. I've never experienced this. I don't even know anybody who's ever had anything that has happened like this to them. This is unbelievable. And his response was, well, don't get too excited. I said, what do you mean? And I think he said something along the lines, well, unless you've got a circus tent, we've still got some work to do. I said, what do you mean? What are you talking about? He said, you need a building. I need some plans. And make a long story short, over the next 2 years, over the next couple of months, we developed plans. We settled out on them. I had no guidelines. It just says, here's the land. Give me a building plan. I had no plan. I had no budget. I had no pointers. I had nothing. So what do you do? So we began to design that. He said, according to the vision that you gave, you told me about that day, the vision that you had, this envisionment of ministry here where you're at. I said, I need something that'll incorporate that vision. I said, okay. So ultimately this was the end result of the plan. And we met up, looked over a kitchen table, spread the plans out on the table. And he said, I like it. Do you like it? I said, yes, sir. He said, will it do all the things you said you want to do in your vision? I said, yes, sir. And he fist bumped me and said, let's do it. And we received the financial blessing to build this building, which is like 14,000 square feet, sitting on 32.5 acres. Brand new facility. We didn't even have furniture to even put in this place when we moved in. We didn't know what to do. And so here we just celebrated, I think, our 4th year in the building. And it's just been a wild journey. I mean, we've had influx and waves of people come, just like anything else. Any other churches, you have people come in that maybe that they're not ready yet, or this is not a fit for them, and they go. But we have people that are consistently trickling, and now I think we're up to about five or six families that have actually moved from afar to here, including 2 of our rotational speakers here moved all the way from Texas. We've got people that have moved from South Georgia, people moved from several other places to be part of the assembly, and it was almost like that was the main thing that was happening for a while, is people were actually moving here, and people were hearing about that, and they're thinking that's the oddest thing ever. And now we're starting to see, as we're settling in here, we're starting to see an influx of local people.
Wow.
People that knew us from before and maybe even thought we're out on a strange limb, or now it's like people are continuing still to come to the realization there's more to this thing than this walk of quote unquote following the Messiah or Christianity. There's more to it than what we had always been fed our whole life. And people are coming, and they're just showing up, and just, are calling on the phone or sending us emails going, hey, when are your services? And then they come, and of course the typical question every time somebody comes to the door that's new, where are you from? How do you hear about it? How did you hear about us? And now we're starting to get, we had a guy this last Sabbath, he literally lives a mile and a half from here. Didn't know we were here, and finds us somehow online. And I've had several people through seeing interviews that we've done, that you and I have done, the interview I've done with, John Sherman and those guys at 119 Ministries. And that's how they find us, and they start researching us and looking us up. And that's kind of been the journey.
Wow.
And we're just continuing to develop. Again, we've been in the building now for, I think we're going on our right at 4 years. And the only thing that we have left to do is to incorporate the entire vision, is to do the campground for the feast, an official, legitimate, fully functional campground. And we have went through all the preliminaries now. We've got, we got the permitting we need. So hopefully by this time, by Feast of Tabernacles next year, hopefully we'll be in that phase 2. Campground will be complete.
And that's so cool, first of all. And it's like a miraculous journey that
Yeah.
you've been on over the last 7-8 years. So will that campground include or have this kids camp or whatever, or will that happen? Or
that's the plan.
Okay.
Of course, I believe that we do things slow and steady wins the race, and we don't try to jump into things we can't finish. Yeshua said, of course, he's talking about faith, but I believe it's still applicable. Said, nobody goes to build a house without making sure he's got what it takes to finish it.
Yeah.
And so our focus is to get that. Next step is to get that finished, get it built, and then we want to venture out and begin to do, like family builders conferences, couples retreats, hopefully like pastoral retreats where we can, because nobody understands pastoral ministry like pastoral ministers. And so they need a place to come and have some solace and maybe take some time for them to spend a little bit of time with their spouse or to fellowship with one another. And so that's part of the plan, is to have conferences that, family builders type conferences, couples retreats, spousal retreat type deals, and hopefully, youth camps and things like that. Yeah, that's part of the whole vision, is to get that underway.
That's awesome. My goodness. Whoa. Okay. So what are do you think that this movement is still growing? I guess that's the question.
I do believe that this movement is growing. What I don't necessarily believe is that this is a different religion. I mean, and I feel like that too many people paint it out, even in this walk, they paint it out to be something different. In contrast to what, people tend to they get cringy when they hear that, in this walk, for some reason, get real cringy about the term Christian. And they'll almost separate themselves, to unidentify as a Christian. And I think that's a horrible tragedy that happens, because, you can go back to whatever linguistics, however you want to go, but definition today, when you look up the term Christian, it means one who follows the teachings of, most of your definitions say Jesus Christ of the Bible, or, the Messiah found in the Holy Bible. And if that's not what we're doing, then what are we doing? And so we have no problem with that term. So I believe that it's still moving forward. I feel like that, since we first began to come in this walk, in 2010, roughly 2009, 2010, as we began to wake up, and it took a little bit of time for us. It wasn't like it happened overnight. It came in phases. And I've talked to so many people that seem to have experienced a very similar thing. It happened in stages. Some people, at first, it was they began to realize they weren't supposed to eat certain things. Other people, it was they realized that the holy days of the Feast of the Bible were legitimate and we should be doing them as believers. And then others with the Sabbath day. With us, the first thing with us was the Sabbath day. And it was the Sabbath day, then food, then the holidays for us. That was the stage that came. And, we went through a phase that I try so hard to encourage people not to do, is when they come into this walk, it's natural, man. I can remember being filled with this tremendous amount of zeal, thinking that everybody who proclaims to love the Creator described in the Bible would want to hear. They would want to hear this because this is true, and they'll be so excited, and they weren't. And in turn, it created animosity. I was jaded against, for a little bit against the mainstream church. And I believe that, in that zeal, a lot of people do it not according to proper knowledge. And what happens is we begin to do more damage than we do good, with a full intent to share the truth. What we become, honestly, is a stumbling block rather than a stepping stone. And I think that's crucial, because, I just spoke a message where I spoke about, where Yeshua tells us that we're supposed to be the salt of the earth, and where would, how would it be salted if it loses its savor? And it's interesting that word, as I was studying that out, that word savor is the Greek word moreno, which reminds us a lot of the word moron that we get. And honestly, I believe that's some of the root where it comes from, wild enough, because, and it's translated savor, and its secondary definition means dull, flat, or tasteless. Where will it be salted, or what would happen if it loses its flavor? But the primary definition means to act in the part of foolishness, or to act as a fool. And I felt like that I was guilty of that for a while, because acting like a fool because out of my zealousness, I just wanted to argue and prove my point, and not realizing that what I was doing was doing more harm than it was good. I wasn't taking the advice of Scripture that says, little by little, to here a little and there a little. And what I was doing when I would come across somebody who's willing to have a religious conversation with me, I wasn't satisfied with just saying, let me tell you a couple of reasons why I do things I do. No, in a electrical terminology, I guess technology, if you're using that kind of terminology, what I want to do is an entire hard drive reboot. I wanted to tear down everything that you understood and start from scratch. And what I ended up doing was just doing overload. And I felt like that caused harm. And it took a while to try to rein back in on that. And I think that's something that I'm, in ways I'm seeing that balance, because I have seen people that come in this walk, got hyper zealous, got very stringent, and honestly get hung up in what we would typically consider to be something we'd call legalism. They get hung up in that so bad with such a zeal that we lose sight of the real problem at hand. The real problem with this movement is the same thing with any problem that happens. The problem's us, people. Humanity gets in the way. And we began to speak and to preach all about rules and regulations, laying aside the grace and mercy of our Father. And I met so many people who came in this and got really, really, really stringent. And it's like after a period of time, after so much rejection, if you will, they take a step back, swallow a big bite of humility, and come full circle. And that's a good thing that happens. We still have some that are really, really pushing it, pushing the envelope, and it's really sad because we should be, as I mentioned, salt. Salt in ancient days was very important because it was a preservative. And actually, I don't know how many people that I've talked to really know. They probably know it more than I do. But there was, the old phrase, that a man's worth is salt. Where we get that from is actually at certain times Roman soldiers were paid in salt because it was so valuable. But another thing that salt does is it brings flavor to life. And I feel like that we should, as believers, I believe that there is a way that we can stand firm on our convictions, not compromise, and still build bridges instead of burning them, if that makes sense. We can build bridges with people instead of burning them. And I think that's important because Yeshua said that it's by our love for one another that the world would know that we're His. And we're too busy arguing about non-essential things in this walk, and that's the part that scares me.
What do you think is the solution to that? And also to circle back to the Christian thing, like just saying the word Christian and saying, yeah, I'm a Christian who believes that the Torah commandments are relevant to my life also, just like they were to Yeshua. Mm-hmm. Why do you think that was like seen when people, at least when people first come into this, and also even now, people who've been in this for a long time, they're like, I don't want to call myself a Christian. Why do you think that is? What is this impetus for the distancing? And also, after that, do you have hope that we'll get over this? I don't know what you'd call it. You called it astringent. Mm-hmm. This astringent way of being.
Yeah, and so I understand why that people want to disconnect from that term. What people need to realize is that everybody that walks through the door of if you're in pastoral ministry, if you have a fellowship, assembly, church, whatever you want to call it, people get all hung up on linguistics, but if they come in the door, most of the time they bear scars. They've been injured. Either they have seen legalism at its worst, condemnation, lack of love, lack of grace, lack of mercy, or they've seen extreme hypocrisy. And so the problem is, and I acknowledge the problem, that there are those, not everybody, but there is a popular persona of the Messiah of the Bible who does not line up with the one that we find in the pages of the book. It was when I was in Israel on an educational tour. I was there for an educational immersion, and I remember clearly when I realized one of the main reasons that non-Messianic Jewish people reject Yeshua as a Messiah is because the one that is presented to them can't be him. We present, and I say we, I'm talking about everything under the terminology of Christendom, under that umbrella, and I'm not picking on any denominational name or anything. When we present a Messiah who came, disannulled the Father's commandments, and changed the rules, they know, because they're familiar enough with the Torah, they're familiar enough with the Tanakh to know that's not him. Couldn't be him. Because the scripture says that we're to avoid people who do that. And if Yeshua, Jesus, the Christ, came and annulled all the instructions that were given by the Father, then they justifiably crucified him. That's the sad truth. And when I realized that the message I preached at that time was that version, I realized that I contributed to why they don't believe. And that was hard. I sat down on the shore of the Sea of Galilee and cried that day. We were intended to be a stumbling block to lead them and provoke them to jealousy, to wonder what we had that they didn't. But instead, we became a stumbling stone because we present a Messiah that can't be him. So I understand that what people are doing when they say, I don't want to be a Christian, or I'm no longer a Christian anymore, or they'll say things, when I was a Christian, they'll say things almost like past tense. I understand why they say that, because they want to create distance between the Jesus, the unbiblical version of the Messiah, in comparison to the one that's really in the book. And, it's always said that, the Bible has always maintained a bestseller status, but it's the least read. And so all people knew about him was what they'd heard about him. And that's true for the majority of believers. I've found it to be true even in this walk. All they've done is exchanged loyalty to who they're listening to rather than actually looking for themselves. Or they do look for themselves and they go off on an island by themselves. And when we're left alone, we'll lead ourselves to destruction because there's nobody there to hold us accountable. There's nobody there to bounce off of. There's nobody there to rein us back in or to reason the scriptures with to find out, because just because it's an idea that pops in our head doesn't mean it's true. And a man left to himself will lead to his own destruction. And I believe that that's why the community is so, so, so important. And that's why we have all these wild, strange things that are being preached in the world today, all across the board, from various denominations of mainstream, what we call mainstream Christianity, all the way into those who believe that the whole Bible is relevant and valid for us today. And so I get why.
I do want you to get into that, actually. But before that, can we go back to selling a Jesus that is not aligned with the Bible? That will blow people's minds.
Yeah.
Who aren't already in this walk. They'll be like, what do you mean? Jesus, this can't be the Jesus. And what do you mean that a Jew would say, oh, we need to crucify him? Like, there is Bible for that. Deuteronomy 13 comes to mind. But
right.
Can you talk about any of that?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Deuteronomy 13, Deuteronomy 18 tells us, even if a man comes, proclaiming to be a prophet, and he, even if the things that he prophesy come to pass, and I'm paraphrasing it, but if he leads you away from
the words of this
the
law.
words, yeah. If he leads you away, even if the thing that he prophesies come to pass, and he leads you astray from what's written, what's true in the word, then you're to put him to death. So, by the litmus test, if Jesus, Yeshua, Yehoshua, whatever you can go by, if he came and changed the rule book, if he came and said, nah, and it's funny because we hear, it's all in the way it's presented. We always hear that it's not only what you say, but it's how you say it. And when we read in the pages of what we call the Sermon on the Mountain, Yeshua says, you've heard it said, don't commit adultery. But I say unto you, any man who looks at a woman with lust has committed adultery already. And what we hear is a contrast. But the way it's been presented to me my entire life, and by most people I spoke to, it's you've heard it said, and people get all hung up in the you've heard it said versus what is written, but he meant, because it was verbal transmission, a lot of it then. In other words, you've heard it said, what is written is don't commit adultery. But I tell you, in contrast, something different. Rather than hearing it in the way we should have heard it, was when he says, you've heard it said, or you could say it is written, don't commit adultery. But what you need to understand is, if you look at a woman with lust, you've committed adultery. Clarification of what was truly intended in the writing. I believe fully that's what Yeshua meant when he said in Matthew 5:17, I didn't come to destroy the law and the prophets. I didn't come to destroy them, but I came to plerao them. I came to fulfill them. Plerao, Greek, is the word. And it means to fill to the fullest, to fill to the brim where it lacks nothing. It's interesting because in Romans 15:19, Paul uses that same word, and it's translated as have fully preached. In Romans 15:19, he said, when I came to you, I have fully preached the gospel. Have fully preached is the same word as translated in Matthew 5:17 is fulfill. Now, if we switch those and we say, Yeshua said, I didn't come to destroy the law and the prophets, but rather I come to fully preach them. Because in the definition of plurality, it means to correctly teach. In that definition, to fill to the brim lacking nothing, to correctly teach or preach. And so when we present a Jesus who comes and changes the rules, disannuls what is clearly written from God, Elohim, Yahweh, then that's a problem according to the Bible itself. So if we present that Jesus to the world, that Messiah, again, whether you use the Hebrew, whether you use the Greek, whether you use English, I don't care if you use Spanish, Japanese, whatever. If we preach that Messiah that's not in the pages, as one, if we preach him who comes and disannuls his Father's command, they justifiably crucified him. Because why? Deuteronomy 13 says, put him to death.
That is what it says.
And that's the reality. So I understand why they disconnect. I understand why they want to distance themselves, because they don't want to associate with that. But we don't get to reinvent the wheel. I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and just because, I can remember being I remember being in the Baptist church. I never remember, if anybody's ever done familiar, if you're not familiar, look up, there's a group called the Westboro Baptist Church. Anybody that take 10 minutes to check, they'll realize that name is in their title. Baptist is nowhere near what the traditional Baptists believe. But I never remember hearing a Baptist conference thinking about changing their name because somebody somewhere misrepresented them.
That's a good point.
So I'm not going to change the term Christian because somebody misrepresents the Christ that's in the Bible. Why would I do that? I can, in our assembly, again, we don't practice legalism when it comes to pronunciations here. We typically lean toward the term Yeshua and Yahweh in the Hebrew. Why do we use those terms? Especially when it comes to Yeshua, is because the Yeshua of the Bible is a lot different in contrast to a lot of mainstream versions of Jesus. Even though they're the same person, they're just mischaracterized. So we use that as a way to delineate the difference between the two. We have no problem using the term Jesus for English. I believe that Yahweh transcends human language.
Yeah.
And we get hung up on, we start making mountains out of molehills. And the sad part about it is we see a lot of bad, the internet is a blessing and a curse because there's no filter. People can say whatever they want to and get away with it. And we see a lot of misinformation. Accusations. I see them constantly. One of the common ones I see a lot is hear terminology like people making reference to Constantine inventing or creating Christianity. And that's not true at all. Do a diligent, honest search. Do a diligent study and you can find that. They want to say, the Council of Nicaea, when Constantine invented Christianity. No, he didn't. That's not what he was there for at all. That's not what he done. It's just not historically accurate. And I feel like it would be really, really good for the movement if people would start, because falsehood's falsehood. Whether or not it's paid with good intention, it's still false. And a lie's a lie. And if we tell lies, that's not a good thing. And it's not becoming a believers. And we need to be very careful to speak.
This is the hard part. This is the hard part about when you realize something so linchpin to your faith as, oh, Yeshua, Jesus did not do away with the law. He fully preached. He brought the fullness to it, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
It's such a life-changing thing that this is what we've been talking about. You question everything. Even worse, I mean, you question everything, and then you only will rely on your own level of knowledge and your own capacity to study honestly. And not everyone studies honestly. Honestly, they try to, but I don't know. Maybe they have bad sources. Maybe they're not vetting the sources properly. That's the whole reason I had a job as a journalist, because I would do that.
Yeah.
I would go and find the source, and you can't go quote something that has nothing to do with your article. You can't find a source that is inaccurate or a liar or whatever. And so, anyway, I'm just trying to fill in the fact that this is happening a lot. Sadly,
it does. It's really sad. And another thing that happened, I've had a desire. I prayed about it a long time, even before I came into this full circle into this understanding, and my journey, faith journey now, is I always had a desire to go for formal education, seminary. And I've had so many people who look at me cross-eyed like that was a horrible thing, like I was going to be indoctrinated. And honestly, I didn't have a real positive outlook necessarily on seminary, because when I came to the understanding I did, I had lots of conversations with people who were exuberant in their education, and they very well educated people, according to, papers, and that just didn't seem to be able to see the writing on the wall. And so therefore I didn't have a high expectation about seminary, but I had a desire to go. Mine was based off of, what Paul said, I'll become all things to all men so that by all means some might be saved. I didn't think I was going to go into training, education to gain a lot of wisdom, so to speak. But, people are leery to go to a shade tree mechanic over somebody that's certified. And so there are people in mainstream, because like I said, this began when I was in mainstream, and I knew that there were people who would not lend an ear to anything that I had to share, that I felt like was on my heart, that I'd studied out diligently, simply because I had no education, formal education in religious matters. And so my idea was to go to seminary and get the certificate, to hopefully that certificate would be a key that would unlock the ears of those who normally wouldn't hear. That maybe they would offer to hear what I had to share, even though I didn't learn anything while I was there. That's kind of what my mindset was, is that I paid my dues, I got the education. Now it's going to be used as a key to unlock the ears of people who otherwise wouldn't listen. But man, I'm going to tell you, it's been an amazing journey, because I got far more than I bargained for. And contrary, and I'm sure that there are some seminaries out there that are really dogmatic in indoctrination. I'm fortunate that I'm where that's not taking place. Matter of fact, I've been extremely encouraged and hopeful for this walk and this movement and where this is going, where Christianity is moving, because the terms Yeshua, the terms Yahweh, the feast of the Bible are being mentioned. The Sabbath days being talked about in seminary. As a matter of fact, I'll never forget when I finally bit the bullet and I decided to go ahead and move forward, and I signed up for my first class. The very first assignment I got was on the Sabbath day. The first assignment in my college endeavor was to write a paper, a dissertation about the Sabbath day. I thought, well, here we go. I'm going to get kicked out. And if I'm going to get kicked out, I'd rather get kicked out now than later after I put a lot of time in. So, man, I just poured my heart into that. I threw out what I believed and why I believed it, and I tried to back it up with credible sources. I tried to back it up with history. I tried to back it up with the scriptures, and turned it in, kind of cringing, bracing for impact, expecting to get serious backlash. And I got a perfect score. What? And the professor was a doctorate. He had his doctorate. And I was like, what just happened here? I was expecting to get kicked out of school because I just went really against the grain of what would be typical. And got a perfect score and comments from him talking about how well put together my paper was and how I proved my points. And I'm like, whoa. So I thought, it caused me to get curious. I said, who is this guy? So I began to research him online, kind of like when I was trying to find you. But when I found him online, I found out he had written a book. And I found the book. And the name of the book was Taking a Second Look at the Big Ten. And I found out this guy believes that the Sabbath is valid. Mainstream seminary professor. And so many times I've had the opportunity to share my faith in this. I've had classmates reach out. I've had classmates ask me for a copy of the documentary. I mean, I've had great conversations, and and it's really helped me learn when I'm talking about how we can speak the truth in love without necessarily offending people and burning bridges. That has been my experience because I've learned a lot about how to say what I'm wanting to say without feeling like I've poked you with a pitchfork and getting a knee-jerk reaction. And that's been a big blessing for me. And it's amazing some of the historical things that I didn't know in the studies that I had done and some reinforcements of studies I had already done. So I've been extremely blessed. I have a great appreciation far above what I had before. And I think that's key. And like you said, and it all boils down to, even though I had done honest, diligent studies and I had found the things I needed to find, like I said, a lot of people, I think, they don't know how to do a legitimate, honest, diligent study on matters that they're looking at. They get bad sources, bad information, and this has helped me to be able to do that even better than before.
That's great. That's great, man.
So I'm excited for that. So
when will you complete your journey?
Spring.
No way.
Yeah, finally. It's been a long time coming.
Good job.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. It's a lot of work, but so
good job.
I'm glad I didn't know what I was getting into when I started, because I probably would have never done it.
Are you glad it's almost over?
Oh yeah. Whether I go back and go further, I don't know. But I'll have my degree in theology when I get done, and I'm thankful because what I've done is a well-rounded thing that's I've dealt with specific books. I've dealt with Old Testament, New Testament, history. Church history is a big deal. And it's amazing when you do a diligent study of just even mainstream, a diligent study of church history, and why do mainstream churches do some of the things that they do. And we find out these things are not ancient. Just like the traditional thing that we see in a lot of mainstream churches, the altar call, the hymn of invitation, at the end of anybody that's been in a mainstream church knows, at the end of the service, most of the time they'll have some sort of a hymn of invitation. It's that moment when they're asking you to give your life to Christ, whatever it is at the very end. And that what they call the altar call is when those kind of things began. They come out of the first and second Great Awakening period. This is 1800s.
Really?
Yeah. It's relatively new stuff. And, and it's pretty amazing to have learned a lot of that and about some of the instrumental people who were involved in developing those things. And so much more tradition than I ever even imagined.
Okay, I got a crazy question for you.
Okay.
All right. Since you've been steeped in this stuff for years now,
Uh-huh.
like in the academic world, reading all the papers and talking to all the people, I've been thinking about this, like telling the story of the first century church doctrine, right? That Yeshua and all the writers of the New Testament were practicing, and then showing as Yeshua dies and resurrects, right? Let's say he leaves Earth, okay? We're going to do a metaphor here. His sun sets, and we get twilight and nautical twilight, astronomical twilight, all this stuff until we get to like full dark. And it's as if that is mirrored in the Christian doctrine, and even in history where we're plunged into the dark ages. And then we start seeing bits of light like recover as the sun begins to rise again, if you will. And the Reformation happens and all this stuff. We're moving over hundreds of years here. But do you think that there is, all of that crap to say, do you think that there is a possibility that there's like a thread of people who were keeping these laws?
Oh, yeah.
Throughout all of history?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think there's historical evidence of that, possibly?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. That's just like, again, I speak from where I come from. So when I'm talking about, I talk about coming from out of the, the Baptist denomination. When I talk about that, one thing that blew my mind was to realize that there was a group out there called the Seventh-day Baptist that preceded the Southern Baptist by 150 plus years.
I didn't know that.
Yep. And by all indication, they're the ones who introduced it to the groups that later become like the Seventh-day Adventist movement. So there has been, and everything I see in the first and second Great Awakening periods and all through history, through church history, there has been men who have seen things that were wrong, that were trying to get them right. Did they all do it the right way? No. Did one man have it all figured out? No. But we've been moving forward. Why? Because it's like, and I'll use the term denomination really loosely, because these people who developed denominations, where you have, when I'm talking about, whether it's Seventh-day Adventists, whether it's Jehovah's Witnesses, whatever you call it, whatever denomination, Baptist denomination, Pentecostal, whatever, Church of God, Church of Christ, whatever, Church of God, Seventh-day Baptist, Sabbatarian Church, whatever, there's been men who have been bringing pieces of the puzzle together. I don't agree with the Jehovah's Witness, but there's one thing that they got that I agree with. They realized his name was not God. They realized that was a title. And of course, in my personal opinion, I think they mistranslated it and they come up with Jehovah. But they realized his name wasn't God. That was a title. And then you have the Seventh-day Adventist movement. I don't agree with the things that many tenets of their doctrine, but they got the day right. Moving into my home turf, the Southern Baptist Church, they realize that salvation is by grace through faith, plus or minus nothing. They got that. That's true. Now, they oil it up real good, where it's real greasy, and then, that's a problem. But they realize it's not of a man's merit that he's saved and redeemed. It's by the blood of Yeshua. It's by faith in him, and that's it. Period. They got that part. You get the Church of Christ denomination, for example. They realize that salvation is more than just something that comes out of your mouth. That your life has to match your testimony. Do I agree with some of their conclusions? No. But they understand that a verbal profession or faith without works is dead. They get that. So we have been moving forward. What we need to work on in this walk is trying to eat the meat and spit out the bones of all these other doctrines. We need to be able to put together, hold on to that which is, test everything, and hold on to that which is good. Throw the rest of it out. That's our goal. I think most people that come into this walk, that's what they say. They want to get back to the beginning. They want to get back to what it looked like. Many people I know, I've been guilty of saying, I want to get back to the book of Acts church. But it had its problems. It had its problems. But we want to get back to the true walk as best as we can. And we're going to stumble along the way. None of us have all the answers, and we need to figure that out because nobody has all the answers. I've gleaned a lot of what little bit I know from other people who saw things that I didn't see in the beginning. That when I hear it out and test it, I'm like, whoa, that's true. My grandfather, he taught me a long time ago. He said, listen to everything. He said, what's valuable, keep it. What's not, let it go. And so that's key to help us continue moving in the right direction. Our goal is to get a more pure version of what it looks like to follow the Messiah, right? I think that's what the goal of most people in this, at least in this walk, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for the truth. Follow the truth. And we get hung up in the weeds sometimes. And we start casting the baby out with the bathwater. Is instead of looking and going, okay, this one had this right, that one had that right, this one had this right, this one had this right, this one had that right. And taking all those puzzle pieces that are right and making a mosaic out of those instead of just throwing everything away. Because that's what we do. We can't find one piece of the puzzle, so we throw the whole puzzle out. Throw it all away. And that's a problem. And we get hung up on the things that don't matter. And I don't know if I'm getting ahead of the game there and talking about those kind of things, but
no, go ahead. Let's get into that. Yeah.
And we're trying to reinvent the wheel. And it's like this spirit of conspiracy creeps in. Now we doubt everything and everybody, and everything's a lie, and everybody's trying to deceive us, and the boogeyman's behind every bush. I've stumbled along the way, and I preached from a pulpit and preached some things that I've actually looked back at some of my old sermon notes that made me want to vomit. But I wasn't doing it because I was trying to deceive. I thought that what I was doing and what I was preaching was true. And I imagine there's a lot of people like that. But one of the things that's key is again, test everything, honest, diligent, thorough study with good sources. Test everything. Hold on to that which is good, throw the rest of it away. And don't just look for, the key is don't look for sources that agree with what you already are preconceived. Here's the reality that we all need to come to grips with. And in this walk, and because I had an opportunity that I didn't know anything about this walk, I didn't know this walk existed. And I came into it with no outside influence at all. And had someone come up to me and said, Jason, let me tell you the better way, you need to stop calling yourself a Christian, that would turn me away right then. So we need to be careful what we say, regardless of our intentions of why we say it. We need to be careful what we say, because we could seriously and grossly mislead somebody. But it is important that we try to stick to the essential things that really make a difference. Man, I see people burning bridges all the time about things that don't matter. And they want to make it a hill to die on. Things that do nothing for the body of Messiah. I mean, talking about just one in particular that seems to be so rampant all the time. I hear people talking about people make into a big ordeal. I mean, they make it an essential. It's something simple like, what happens after we die? You know, we get into the, are we conscious? Are we unconscious? Are we asleep in the ground? And my question really boils down to this is, let me ask you how, knowing one of those, how does it affect your faith today? If you know the answer, how does that affect your faith today? To me, it doesn't. It's irrelevant to what I do today. Doesn't matter if I go to sleep and I rest and lay in the ground unconscious for the next 1,500 years, as you should, it delays his return. Or whether I'm conscious in the presence of our Creator in some form, fashion that I don't understand. And I don't need to understand that, because what I need to know is I'll make sure I've got it right now. But yet, man, it's divisive. They think if you don't believe it a certain way or something, that you're some sort of horrendous heretic. And I'm like, we just get hung up on some of these things. You know, doesn't matter. You know.
What would you say? I agree with you. What would you say to someone who just came into this like last spring, and they're just starting? They're like trying to do Passover. They don't know what they're doing, but they know that this is right. This idea that these laws persist. What would you say to them?
Okay. The first thing I always tell them is I always warn them about the pitfalls. Be careful, because don't get overzealous. You know, don't get overzealous because it can lead you to a wild path. I'm not saying don't be excited, but what I say to them is I warn them against that phase of falling into that Torah terrorism kind of thing where they begin to burn all the bridges. I tell them, look, do an honest, diligent study. Because people come into this now, and then, of course, we've got all the calendar debates, and people's arguing about whose calendar's right, and this calendar, that calendar. Look, stop. The one thing that I committed to do when I began my journey to study out my faith and rebuild it from the foundation up was I was not going to move from where I was until I was confident that I was going the wrong way. Tell people, stay where you are. Right where you are. If you find a fellowship that celebrates Passover, if you find the community, stay there. Test everything you hear. Don't listen to a word I've got to say about anything. Hear me, or when I say don't listen, I say don't take it hook, line, and sinker. Is what you do is you hear it and then test it. The one thing I think is key that I tell somebody coming to this walk is when you go to test something, you need to make sure that you look at it from the entire spectrum. You look at people who advocate what you currently believe, and here's the thing that we all must realize. We all come to the table with preconception. All of us do. We are preconceived in different various things, some more degree than other, but we all carry preconception when we come to look at any doctrine. So you make sure when you're looking at it, you're not looking for only things that agree with what you think you currently believe, but all the way to the other end. People who don't. Hear them out. Listen. What does Proverbs say? A man who gives an answer before hearing out a matter, it's foolishness, or it's a shame unto him. Hear the matter out. Hear what they've got to say, but you need to look at all the way across the board. Everybody from everyone from the one that believes exactly the way you do now, all the way to the one who is total polar opposite from you. Hear it all out. But the key is don't move from where you are until you're 100% fully convinced. And I think that slow and steady wins the race. Man, I met so many people who they seem to be influenced by something that just sounds good, and they just ping pong, ping, 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 ping. They're bouncing all over the place. I know one particular gentleman that it destroyed his marriage. His wife wouldn't come in this walk. She thought he was out in left field somewhere. Why? When I got to the root of the matter, is because last month he was this. The month before that he believed that. 2 months before that, he was doing something totally different. And ultimately, that destroyed his marriage. That's scary. We should not be tossed around by every wind of doctrine. We have to be careful, because everything that the things that we might hear deep inside from us very well may be spiritual. But which spirit are you hearing it from? That's the scary part. And to tell somebody is, pace yourself when you come in this walk. Don't get overwhelmed. Come in. You find a good solid fellowship. I mean, the moment that you realize that something's very, very off, then of course you might want to separate yourself if it's a hill to die on. If it's a molehill doctrine, don't worry about it, because you'll both learn something from each other. Every person I've ever had a conversation with that we differed in doctrine and had doctrinal conversation in, I come out winning either way. Either one, I learned something I didn't know and they taught me something, or two, that I studied out the matter again till I was reconfirmed in where I currently stood. Or I found out neither one of us were right. One of those three. And that's the key, is being very cautious not to lend an ear to just anybody and everybody. And like I said, it's tough, because we live in an information age where, and if you can get online, you can find somebody that'll agree with you. And I tell people, when you come in this walk, the last thing you want to do is be a lone island. Don't go alone. Be willing to be held accountable as well as hold other people accountable, because iron sharpens iron. And it's important that people come together and they reason the scriptures together. Because again, I've learned a lot of things from people who saw things and nuances in the scriptures that I didn't see in the beginning. And I think that it's designed that way by Yahweh, because if one of us got all the answers, who would we begin to rely on?
Us.
Yeah, we would begin to rely on ourselves, or we would begin to rely on somebody other than the words in the book. That's why I think it's important, because I think that everybody brings a piece of the puzzle. It's just like spiritual gifting. I mean, there's certain people who have a spiritual gift of patience, charity, mercy, faith. And every one of those are members of the same body. We all bring an element to the table, and community is key.
Do you have hope that, even though there are all these different calendars and all these different beliefs within this core set of beliefs, do you have hope that we will have unity of the body at some point, somehow? Or do we just wait till Yeshua returns? I mean, how's this going to work?
Again, we have the human dilemma, which means we'll never completely unify, because we're human and we're broken and we're messed up. We'll never have complete unity. Should we lean hard into unity? Absolutely. We will never all see. While that's the strive, it's just like our walk. We're not supposed to lie, steal, cheat, commit adultery. We're not supposed to do any of these things, either physically or mentally. All at the same time realizing that we will never arrive in this flesh. But we should never use that as an excuse not to strive for it. I heard a man once say one time, we should never use my flesh as an excuse to sin. Yet all the while we know that while we're in this flesh, the spirit might be willing, but the flesh is weak. And we're not going to do it perfectly. In the same way, we're not going to unify perfectly. But we should never use the excuse of the knowledge that we want to not try and strive to get there. Maturity is a big thing. That's a big key, in my opinion. for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, I think this idea of won't rings a bell, because I was talking to Katie about this recently, because I was like, we're called to be perfect as he is perfect. And she's like, yeah, well, we can't do that. And then I said, yeah, well, he said that, you're right. She's right. We won't do that. Yeah. And I said, but that's a difference there, because he said that the burden is light and he told us to do it. So it doesn't mean that we can't do it. It means we can do it, but we won't do it because the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And I think that is a huge difference between the way that I view things now as I won't do this, but I could. I'm just a jerk. I'm just screwing up. And before, I thought a little bit more of, I can't do it. It's impossible. Even though it says in the word, the burden is light, actually. And so you can do it, actually. So I did it. I mean, Yeshua, speaking from, he did it as a man. He was perfect. That's cool. And he told us to be like him. We won't do it, but we got to try. And anyway, that for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, I think the theme's there all along. I mean, when the Torah was given, Yahweh said, I set before you life and death. Do it this way, and this is the way it'll go for you. Do it the other way, and it's going to go the other way for you. So I set before you life and death. I'm not giving you things that are too hard. You can do it. Like you said, it's not that we can't. It's that we won't. That's the problem.
And if we would do it, our life would be much better for it. Every time we make that decision, it is a 1-0. That's what I love about the sovereign moral code that we get from the Torah, that there's a 1, a yes, and a 0, a no. It's like, and there's so much guidance in that. And it has given me so much guidance in life. Before I even have to ask a question, the question is answered. Yeah. It's helped.
Yeah, I think that was one big thing for Amanda and I when we came to this, is finally have black and white answers to life. Because I'm going to be honest with you, before, sin was a vague thing. There was a lot of gray area there. I mean, there were some things I could put my finger on. But then I found out, through traditional things, that there's a lot of things that were portrayed to me as being sinful that were not. I mean, I was raised up in a...
And vice versa, maybe.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. Yeah, vice versa, for sure. But, being raised up, like I said, in a conservative, Southern Baptist church, any drinking alcohol at all was sinful. And I'll be honest with you, coming to this walk, it took man and I several years to get even comfortable to have a glass of wine. Even though we knew in here that it was okay, because we had been ingrained to believe certain things. And I believe that the biggest problem for us too in this walk is learning to shake off old habits. We all come into this, you can call it preconception or whatever, but when we come into this, we're dragging anchors with us. We got baggage. Some of that baggage we don't even know we have. Some of that baggage comes from when we were former Jehovah's Witnesses, when we were former Southern Baptists, Church of Christ, Presbyterian, Catholicism, name it. And I'm not picking on one. I'm just saying, when we came from where we were to where we are, we brought baggage based off preconception. And learning to cut those loose every time we find one is a good thing. And that's key.
It's a journey, man. It's a journey. Yeah. No, we're not going to, I suppose. I mean, not till he makes it plain. Now, you're in a, I think, rare position where you came into this and then you went to seminary. See, I'm so used to being called.
See, you did it too.
I know. How many times have you heard that? Huh?
Oh, yeah. Oh, cemetery. Yeah. I mean, seminary. See?
How many times have you heard that? Well, I mean, that's like the thing. But so, what? Okay. Tell us about that a little more. Tell us about going to seminary. Tell us about interacting with these people there. And I don't know. And also, what if someone's young and they feel the call to be a minister, and what would you recommend? Would you say avoid it at all costs? And they believe this way.
If they're fully convinced, don't avoid it. You'll be miserable if you do. And people who've never truly been called don't understand that statement. If you're thinking about it, do something different. And, as far as my interactions with again, just getting to hear, and actually part of the whole thing with seminary, some of the things you do is you do discussions where, I have to write a paper on a particular passage of scripture, doctrinal point, whatever. And I have to support it, back it up. And then I have to interact with fellow students. I have to reply to their dissertation as well. And part of it's not about the main point is not about what doctrinal stance you hold in that particular arena, but how you interact with others, how you dialogue, and how you support. Again, the degree I'm going after is kind of unique. It was kind of cool because it covers Old Testament, it covers New Testament, church history, apologetics, church administration. I mean, all kind of a shotgun blast of all these different areas, including some specifics and electives where I choose certain books. Certain books of the Bible that we go into grave detail on. But it's been an overall unbelievably positive experience, other than exhausting. It's tiring when you got kids and family and, pastoral responsibilities and going to school and all that. And it's a lot sometimes.
It sounds like it.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are Southern expressions for that.
It's
I
tough.
want to get some Southern expressions before we're done, if any of them come.
Southern expressions.
You're the king of.
I don't know about that, but sometimes it's just random. I don't know. Sometimes I don't even know where it came from.
You talk about family though, and we got to get into that too. I mean, you have 8 kids, okay, and not all biological, right? And last time, I mean, when we went to this congregation in Indiana, MNLT, you've talked about adoption. You talked about fostering. Yep. And you're passionate about this. Can you talk to us about that a little bit?
Sure. Yes, there's a great need. For 2 reasons. One is because we as people and by large, don't give our life to Yeshua as we should, or we wouldn't have this problem. Second is those who claim to carry that cross of Yeshua that he says that we must carry, don't do our part to help fix it. It's funny because Amanda and I, so many times we've actually had people that we're close to and friends and stuff that say things like when we've had 6 kids in the house, and we get a phone call 10 o'clock at night wanting us to take a sibling group of 3 for, we don't know if it's a weekend, a week, a year, we don't know. And people make the comment, well, you can't take them all. That's a true statement. But I can take one. And if everybody would take one, we wouldn't have a problem. I done a statistical study that said that if just in the state of Georgia, if one family from every church in the state of Georgia would take a foster child, there would be no kids in care. There would be no dilemma. So we don't have enough in the county we live in. There's not enough homes, foster homes for kids. there's more kids in our homes. So these kids are having to be transferred to other areas. Now you've got a child, and of course, the system, the stance of the system is that, or the way that this thing's set up to go is that reunification of the family is the goal. But it's hard enough when a family has been disconnected because of whatever reasons, whether it could be drugs, it could be, that's a big thing today. A lot of what we deal with, it's drug abuse, it's a problem, and the kids are endangered, stuff like that. That's the biggest part. So get the child into a safe environment, get mom and dad, or mom or dad, whoever, get them the help they need, get them rehabilitated, go through a rehabilitation program, whatever, get it fixed, get the child back with their parents, and everybody wins. The problem is when you can't put the child local, and now the child is 3.5 hours away, 4 hours away in a different county, then there's a problem. Reunification becomes more difficult because now communication and visitation is hard. It's complicated. But it is important to do this. Man and I, we have 8. We had 3 biological children. We've adopted 5. The one that you're talking about, the little girl you're talking about that we had just got when we went to that conference in Indiana, speaking on fostering adoption, she was 9-10 days old, something like that. When we first got her, we'd only had her for maybe a week or so when we got up there, or 2 weeks. And I can't remember exactly, but fast forwarding since then, she's 3, about to be 3.5, adopted, everything's done. It just didn't work out where she could go back home. Family just couldn't get their life together. And they only, the state only tolerates that for a period of time. And honestly, before people judge that, they should realize that they offer them plenty of time to get it worked out. But the child's life doesn't go on hold completely forever, indefinitely, until you decide to get your act together. Doesn't work that way. And it's important that we have people, and I said, it's a ministry within itself. Hats off to my wife, because I'm the one that gets to go, and I go work during the day while she maintains those kids. And it's a ministry. It really is within itself. That's a lot of work. Being a mom's a full-time job. And, but man, I'm going to tell you, it's a rewarding experience. These kids didn't do anything to be in the position they're in. And like I said, I understand that not everybody can do it. Everybody can contribute. You can just offering to babysit for a foster family for 3 hours, where mom and dad can go have dinner and watch a movie or something, go on a date night. That's a start. But it's important to do. It's like I said, we're fortunate we have other families in the congregation here that have fostered and adopted children. And I'm not going to say it's always easy. It's hard sometimes. People say, oh, I couldn't do it because I would get attached. Well, we've got attached to every kid we've ever had. And apart from the 8 that we have, the 5 we've adopted, and the 3 biologicals we had over the last several years, we've had probably 30 in our house. And we got attached to every one of them. Doesn't matter if they're there for 3 days or 3 months or 2 years. You get attached. It's tough. And every day that goes by, you learn more about their story and you learn more about their personality, and it's hard. But we got to get over ourselves. It's not about us. Last account I had, I remember Yeshua saying that one thing we need to do is deny ourselves. Look to others above ourselves. Ain't that what the Bible says? It ain't about us. You know? We need to get over ourselves and realize that we're given the strength to face each day. And it's important. These kids need safety. And you can make a lifelong impression on a child like that, whether you keep them for a day, a weekend, a week, a month, a year. And if they do go back home, and go into it with the mindset that you need to understand, if mom and dad get their act together, they should get the kids back. They're their kids. You know? And if they don't, be there to put on the mantle and do it permanently if need be. And like I said, I know you can't take them all. You know, Matt and I made a decision because we got 8, and I'm old and gray-headed now and tired, and so we're having to. We made the difficult decision to close our home, and but we're not going to get out of the loop. We're still going to operate in different fashions. There's certain areas and arenas we're still going to be involved. But it's important.
And can you talk about some of the areas that people may not ever think about? Like, let's say they can't foster for whatever reason. How can they support those who do? Like you talked about babysitting for them, they could go out. Aren't there a couple other ways that people can help? I can't remember. Like, didn't you talk about providing things that might be of...
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, often watch the children, you know, yada, 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 whatever, to babysit where mom and dad can go out, whatever. But you can contribute in some way. I mean, people have a real bad misconception of foster parenting and what's involved. People that, you know, there are people who are the haters that want to say, oh, you do fostering for the money. And that's ridiculous. You get a per diem. And my question to them was ask them, what do they get to babysit a child for an evening? Because you babysit a child, you're providing nothing for them. All you're doing is making sure they stay alive and fix them something out of the refrigerator or something to eat. But when you're fostering, it's 24/7. You're doing everything mom and dad does. You're doing everything to equivalent of about $1.03 an hour, day and night. And so you can contribute. I mean, it takes its own toll on the family. You know, it takes a financial toll. It takes resources, you know, and you can help them. You can, you know, I mean, something as simple as gifts. I know families that are not able. We've been blessed to be able to move forward. He always provided for us, and you know, I know families that we've had kids come into our homes that are on what they call respite care. Means that we're basically in a babysitter position for maybe a week while foster mom and dad is gone on a business trip or maybe on vacation or a cruise.
So people could do that like as well. They can
respite care. Yeah. They can get into fostering and doing respite only, where only they just do, like I said, babysit, and we take the children out to go eat dinner one day let's just say we go to the local Mexican restaurant, eat dinner, and those kids are ecstatic because they've been in foster care and they haven't had an opportunity to go because it costs money and resources, and maybe those, and I use that as probably a bad analogy to say they're going on a cruise or going on a vacation or whatever, but it could be business, it could be medical. Maybe one of them has to have surgery or something like that, and you're basically taking care of the child in an interim period, and those kids have been in care for months, have never been out to eat because maybe foster parents couldn't afford to take them. And so you can help, contributing. You can help contributing financially, give them a gift certificate, let them go out to eat, help the kids. There's lots of resources you can do. Lots of things. There's lots of things you can do.
I think that helps. I never thought about anything else like on the way to that fostering. service.
Yeah. And there are people who think I can't do it because I can't afford it too. But, but that's where the per diem comes in. It's a reimbursement that tries to help offset the expense. And it's not an income, it's a reimbursement for what it costs. Because when you're buying food, for these kids and clothes and, that's something, buying kids clothes or essential items that, helping out. If you find a local foster family that you want to support, you can do it from time to time. And just show them you love them. That's a big thing. Just showing that they've got support. That really reinforces a foster family. That what they're doing is making a difference in somebody's life.
It's a big thing, man. I'm glad you guys have done it, and I hope everyone watching this will look into that.
If they got any questions, they're always open. They're welcome to reach out to us and just ask questions. And, you were there for that conference. And the biggest thing for me was trying to educate people, because a lot of people don't know how it works. They don't know how it works. And that's the biggest thing, is if they have questions, just ask.
Where are the kids if they don't have enough foster families in the county?
If they're not in the county, they try to find another foster home in the state somewhere. And if they can't find that, then sometimes those children have to go to a group home. But they are not allowed to be they're not allowed to be alone, left on their own when they come into care. So literally what happens sometimes, if they come in, like a child comes in care late at night and they can't find a home that night, the caseworker, the intake worker who takes the child into custody has to go in a hotel room and stay in a hotel room with the child. Sometimes that happens for days. And that's a disruption in that child's life. Every placement change is traumatic. All of them are traumatic.
You want to call anybody out right now? You want to throw down the mantle, baby?
We've done that a few times and got some backlash on that from the podium. Yeah, we have.
Oh gosh, I was gonna just ask you what do you want to add, but I have one more question. Okay. Like, you've now been running this place for a little while, and before that, you were running a group in all those different iterations you talked about. You were in the yogurt shop. You're renting a place. Then you were here. You have a place. Can you, if someone is considering like hosting their own gathering of some sort, can you give some advice, disclaimers, help, anything that you want to say to help them avoid errors?
Sure. So first and foremost, if somebody's feeling like they want to start something up, the first suggestion I make is look around and make sure there's not something good where you are. I don't believe, and that drove me crazy in the mainstream, drives me crazy today, I don't believe that we should have a church on every street corner. Because contrary to what people may think, ministry takes resources. And when you've got 500 people in a community and they're spread out over 40 churches in a, 5 mile square radius, 5 mile radius, then those churches tend to be so thin that the resources that those churches receive through offerings, and people get all bent out of shape about tithes and offerings and all that stuff, but it takes resources. Why it's true that Yahweh doesn't need your money, but he chose people. He gave us an opportunity to be involved. And when you stretch that so thin, now you've got 50 churches that barely have enough resources coming in through tithes and offerings to keep the lights on, much less feed the poor. And again, don't reinvent the wheel. If there is a solid assembly where you are that's not teaching some what you feel to be heretical doctrine, if there's a solid, I'm not saying you have to agree with them 100%, but if there is a legitimate, solid assembly where you are that has biblically qualified leadership, then if you want to make the decision to set up camp next door, whose kingdom are you really trying to build? Yahweh's or yours? And that's tough. That gets right in your face to think about it that way. We didn't intend to start a church. We looked for everything we could to find solidified fellowship local, and it just didn't exist. And we felt like it was Yahweh's hand that moved us to do what we do, and what come about wasn't by our doing. And so, if somebody's feeling really led to do it, again, first of all, look for to see if there's anything close. And rather than trying to invent something or force something, why don't you join what is already taking place? And but if there's not, and there's a need, and you have a calling to do that, then make sure you surround yourself with seasoned men who have experience. People you can confide in, people you trust. They don't have to live close, but if somebody you have a relationship with, seek wise counsel. I'm so grateful that I'm involved with groups of men that are in leadership all over the United States that I have constant communication with. Because you're going to deal with things, especially if you've never been in pastoral ministry. That's a whole nother animal. People have no idea unless you've been there. They can't understand that unless they've been in it. And people constantly, I'm calling people and people are calling me going, hey, let me run something by you. Have you ever had to deal with this? And they're bouncing off of each other. They're reasoning with each other. Again, pastoral ministry is not a lone wolf endeavor either. One thing I will tell you straightforward, and I've seen this cause lots of havoc, is I do believe that elders, plural, and assembly is a biblical model. I do believe that pastoral leadership is set up just like it, scripturally. I mean, I believe that, having pastoral role, if you have associates, that's fine, but there's one ultimate, with a lack of better terminology, there's a chain of command, if you will, in the way that it works. And if you have been called to pastoral ministry, be very careful and don't be hasty about appointing people into leadership that have not proved themselves trustworthy and vetted. I've seen that backfire on people a lot. I caught some flack in the beginning of PTM because I was very cautious, because I had previous pastoral ministry experience in the mainstream church. I just didn't start appointing a bunch of leaders. And I had people that left the assembly because I felt like that they felt like that I should have asked them to be part of leadership, and I didn't. Not that I wouldn't consider them, or not that I hadn't taken a look at them for that, but the Bible says, don't lay hands on any man suddenly. That doesn't mean don't shake your hand. That means I don't appoint you hastily. You need to be vetted. You can't be a novice, can't be a new convert into leadership. Set up some guidelines. One thing you could do is get some established assemblies that have been established for several years, and ask to see that the church's leadership bylaws. Ask for their documentation. How is your church set up? What are the guidelines? What are the rules that it plays by? And look for biblical things. of course. But, we have a rule here that, nobody could ever be appointed into the leadership role unless they've been here for a designated amount of time, have been in this walk at least a designated amount of time. And then also they have to be designated to this assembly in a commitment for a period of time that before they can even be considered. Because what happens is and when I've made those, and I'm talking from experience, I've made those mistakes in the past. Got hasty, saw an opportunity, said, oh yeah, I'll appoint them there, and that lasts no time. And then it turns into a train wreck. And so, talking about Southern terminology, you're talking about, what'd you say, Southern, what'd you call them? Southern phrases?
Yeah.
So, people talking about it's a bad idea. It looks like a freight train that took a dirt road. But yeah, it's that's key, is look for wise counsel. Find people you can surround yourself and be able to ask them, hey man, have you dealt with this before? What's going on? Because, I've heard some wild stuff and I've had to call and ask people, hey man, this is a new one. Have you had this before? And it's amazing because the problem is the human dilemma. And it's amazing at how many times somebody will call and I'll say, hey, have you ever experienced? Yeah. Matter of fact, this sounds eerily familiar. And then, so many times about the same topics. It's crazy that so many of the leaders, they're like, yeah, we dealt with that about 43 times now in the last 10 years. I'm like, really? Like, yeah, this is new one for you. Well, brace yourself because it'll happen again. And get wise counsel on how to deal with those things. It's important. If I was that'd be all I would say to that, really.
Okay, that's great. I think that's helpful.
Yeah, it's not. You're not designed to be there long enough because, like I said, we have a team of leaders, elders. While I'm the pastor of this assembly, we have Bible teachers, and then we have a board of elders that we reason together and have meetings, and all those things are really, really necessary. Those are necessary elements to have to be doing this, I believe, the right way, best you can.
That's great. Well, would you like to add anything else to the greater community as a whole? Anyone listening?
Offer a word of caution, maybe, is be careful, to people. Again, we live in the age of social media and internet accessibility, and while there's much to be said to commend zeal, we have to be really careful with how we present ourselves and the things that we say on social media. Contrary to what you might think, if you are involved in a local community and it's known because you share posts from that assembly or whatever it is, or if just locally you're known that that's where you go, and you're posting things that are controversial, that are unnecessary controversy, controversial topics, controversial doctrines, fringe doctrinal type things, what people don't seem to fathom is that is a direct reflection on the assembly that you attend. For the lack of better terminology, you become damned by association. The assembly, I'm talking about the assembly. Even if you don't attend a local assembly, you have the ability to cast a negative light on believers, period. And we should be very, very careful and take that very, very serious. Because I believe that if we're not careful, we're ultimately one day we're going to stand before Yahweh and we're going to give an account for our life. And when he opens that page of the book and go, why did you say that on social media? And let me give you the account of how many people that affected. Have we really thought about it like that? Have we really thought about that? This was the effect that happened because of what you did. What do you have to say for yourself? I mean, this goes down to all the way down to how we treat our servers in a restaurant. I mean, this is about everything we do. Everything that we do, everything that we say, every decision we make has an effect on somebody else. To what magnitude? We might not ever know. Guy wrote a Christian song about that years ago. It's called Thank You for Giving to the Lord. Do you remember that song? You ever heard that song? You should look it up when you go home. It's called Thank You, and it tells a story about a man who died and was met by all the people that he had affected by the way he lived his life. So many people that he had no idea had any impact. And of course, it's fictional, it's metaphorical, but we play a role. It's amazing because I believe that is the keys to the kingdom that Yeshua said we have. We have the ability to open up the gates or close them. How? By whether or not we not only present the gospel, not only to who we present the gospel to, but to how we present it. And that's serious. It matters. It really does. Because we'll never know. I've said it before. One of the men that was the most instrumental in my walk in my life preached the gospel to me louder than anybody I'd ever heard, but he never said anything about it. The way he lived told me there's something different. The way he lived spoke louder than anything he could have ever said. And we need to learn to live like that. Instead of getting online and throwing scriptural rocks at each other, we need to be living out the gospel. Living like we're trying to represent a kingdom. And that's how we'll make a difference. That's how people will start giving credibility. They'll start looking to you while you look different than others. That would be the thing I would say, is be careful what we say, be careful how we say it, be careful how we act, because the world's watching. I didn't realize that to the detail until one day Amanda and I were in a restaurant where a man told me he'd been following me on Facebook for 3 years. I had no idea. Saw him in a restaurant, hadn't seen him in 10 years, probably 10 years or more. Hey, how you been doing? He's telling me all about his life, and he said, and he asked me something about what you been. I said, oh yeah, me and Amanda just got back. We had to go. I was preaching. Oh, he said, oh yeah, I know. He said, I've been following you on Facebook for 3 years. People are watching. When you think they're not, they are.
Well, for anyone else who wants to watch you and connect with you, where can they find you?
You can go. We have a webpage. Our website is our ministry name. It's pursuingtruthministries.com. You can find us also Pursuing Truth Ministries on Facebook. We have a YouTube channel, Pursuing Truth Ministries. We don't live stream per se, but we actually do post all of our messages. A lot of times we don't do our, holy day stuff. We don't do that, but our regular Sabbath, messages, teachings, whatever, we post them usually within a week. They run about a week behind. but we try to post them up. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us to email. We're not hard to find. You look us up, gives everything about, our statement of faith. If they're looking to find out what our core tenets are, what, kind of what we believe. I appreciate anybody that's diligent to want to know what they're getting into before they get there. If you have any questions, just call and ask. We're an open book. Send us a message on Facebook, send us an email, give us a call. We'll be happy. But that's the easiest way. And, we're located, in a little town called Mineral Bluff, Georgia, right outside of a little tourist town called Blue Ridge. And a lot of people, especially if you're, Florida or Atlanta area, south, usually a lot of them know where we're at because we're kind of a touristy little town, small town. But, yeah, that's really it. If you want to know more, or maybe if you don't live in the area and you don't think you can visit and you're looking for a fellowship, feel free. That's something that the way documentary is done, it's opened up doors for us to have contacts, and we're familiar with a lot of assemblies in different places. And, we'll be happy to try to minister to you if it's nothing more than trying to help you find a local fellowship somewhere where you can go. Because a lot of people think that there's nowhere, but there is. I've found that, we're everywhere. We really are. It's like we're everywhere. And, it's growing. The movement's growing. I don't think it's a new religion. I think we're just trying to get back to the old path. And, so be careful on your journey. Don't get tripped up in the weeds and stumble into the potholes. That's the biggest thing.
You're right. Jason, it's been a long time, man. So thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk.
Sure. Yeah, man. I appreciate you. Like I said, it's good to see you again. And hopefully you and Katie can come back and hang out with us for a few days and just relax and take it easy. Breathe the mountain air.
That would be...
Drink fresh water.
All right. Well, until then, man. Until next time.
Absolutely.
I created a Patreon so I could kind of help support this thing. But what it has morphed into is a incredibly fun once a month digital gathering where we all the patrons and I get together and talk about the Torah, talk about our lives, talk about questions we might have, problems we're running into. And so if that sounds like something you are interested in, or if you just want to support the podcast, then join our Patreon. It's patreon.com/thelifewithluke.